Braves and baseball fans, it's time to take a trip from coast to coast across Major League Baseball.
There it goes, a long drive. If it stays fair, home run.
One strike away. Sandy into his windup. Here's the pitch. Swung on and missed a perfect game.
Fly ball deep left center. Grissom on the run. Yes! 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 The Atlanta Braves have given you a championship. Listen to this crowd.
Left side, Swanson to first. Braves, world champions.
Braves and baseball talk, straight from the diamond.
Brought to you by Mark Spain Real Estate. Get a guaranteed offer on your home today. And Window Nation. Call the pros at Window Nation at 866-90Nation.
Here's Grant McAuley.
Hello and welcome to From the Diamond. I am Grant McAuley. These are the Kia Studios, the Sports Radio 92.9 The Game. It is a Sunday, which means we are wrapping up the weekend, as it were, for the Braves. Unfortunately, as seems to be the case, week after week after week, we have to talk about the missed opportunities in a series that slipped through the fingers collectively of the Atlanta Braves. They lose 2 out of 3 to the Boston Red Sox thanks to a 3-1 loss on Sunday at Truist Park, a game in which if you missed the first inning, you missed all the scoring. So that kind of tells you where the Braves offense was on this day. It also tells you that, and this is going to be something we really dig into on the show, when it comes to pitching, it may not always feel like the Braves are getting the job done, but it's pretty hard to argue with what's been happening on the mound collectively overall for this team for a while. They're keeping them in games, but the Braves offense is not holding up its end of that bargain. And believe me, they're aware of it. They've experienced it. This has been going on for a while. We're going to dig into some stats that go all the way back to May the 1st of 2024. We're not just talking about what happened in May of 2025 or April of 2025 or what's been happening, since the second half of last year, or, pick a different way to slice this up. We're going to look at a very large sample size of data and try to figure out exactly what it tells us. And what it is with this club that has to improve is no surprise. It's the offense. And the offense is still struggling and still searching for answers. And just when it seems like they have a breakthrough game, a breakthrough moment, they kind of revert right back to the mean, come right back down to where they've been. And that, quite honestly, is something that they're going to have to address if they want to change their trajectory for this season, their momentum for this season, because the National League East, it looks like, is going to be a pretty tough one. I think we knew that when it came to division battles. There were going to be some teams that weren't going to be easy to contend with, and I mean that both literally and figuratively. The Philadelphia Phillies got on their run, took over the top of the National League East. Now, all of a sudden, as the Phillies kind of sputtered in the last few days, well, now the New York Mets have caught up with them. And they're high up on the division, well above where the Braves are, and that's something that obviously there's a lot of baseball left to be played, and we can keep saying that until there's not, I guess. But with 104 games to go, I guess it's still apropos. But the Braves are 9.5 games behind the first-place Mets. That means, by some very simple math, they are much closer to the last-place Marlins. And, by the way, the Braves are sitting in 4th place, as the Marlins are only 13 games out, Braves 9.5 out. The difference between these two clubs, 4 in the win column, 3 in the loss column. That's the difference between the Braves and the Marlins this year. I don't think, if you'd ask me, coming into spring training, well, where are the Braves going to be when it comes to the Marlins? Are these two clubs going to be kind of in a similar boat? When we turn the calendar to the month of June, I would have said that would be pretty unlikely unless the Marlins had all of a sudden gone out and made a whole bunch of moves and changed the overall roster composition that they're dealing with. But that's not the case. And I really think at this point, it's kind of the old glass houses thing that any of us can point at another club at this point, maybe other than the Colorado Rockies, and say, well, that team is worse off. Because at some point, and that point, I think, has started to come around here. You are who you are. And as the saying went earlier this year when we were talking to Brian Snitker or hearing his insights on what exactly it is can happen, needs to happen to turn this club around, he said, well, you are who you are until you're not. Well, the Braves are still in that boat. You may be thinking about this club based on the talent you see on the roster and on the field and the lineup card and on the mound on a given day, but it's just not living up to those expectations. And those aren't just fan expectations. Those are the expectations of the team itself. Nobody, I think, is enjoying the ride thus far. It has been a roller coaster for the Atlanta Braves. And what kind of roller coaster has it been just in the month of May alone? As they finished up this month, The Braves, again, I mentioned 9.5 games in back of the New York Mets, so they lost, I believe, 3, if not 3.5 games in the standings in the month of May by virtue of finishing 13-14 in the month. So it wasn't a complete disaster of a month, but it certainly wasn't anything close to giving you the sustained momentum. It felt like at one point it was getting there. And then the last 10 days really kind of shone a light on the continued struggles of the offense of this club. They took 2 out of 3 from the Boston Red Sox at Fenway Park. At that point, the Braves moved over 500 by a game, but over 500. Kind of zooming along. Maybe you felt like they were starting to put some serious distance between themselves and the way they started the season. And then all of a sudden, that roller coaster, that dip came right back around, and the Braves lost a series in Washington. And the Braves lost a series to the San Diego Padres in what should have been a weekend of enjoyment, to be honest, because you got Ronald Acuña Jr. back. That was supposed to be this missing piece. And I'm not trying to put this all on Ronald. It's not all on one player. It's on multiple players. And we'll dig into the stats and, of course, the names. You know them by now. The usual suspects that haven't been able to do the things they need to do to take this club to the level it needs to be at if it wants to be a contender in the National League East and beyond. It's not just about Ronald Acuña Jr., but losing that series to the Padres. And then I think the coup de grace was going to Philadelphia and having the opportunity, if you could score some runs, to take a series from, at that time, the first-place team and obviously a bitter division rival, win a series up there, get yourself back on track. Instead, you lose 2 out of 3. You get shut out in the first game. You come back within an eyelash of having a chance to steal a game in game 1 of a doubleheader, and then you're not able to finish that one off, then come back and win handily in that finale, which is great. You avoided the sweep, which I think at this point, even in May, you could have referred to that as kind of a disastrous trip to Philadelphia, because how could you look at it any other way? And then you think, okay, we'll come home. We'll come home. A club that's 10-20 on the road this year, by the way. That's the Braves' record away from Truist Park. That's going to have to change. You come home, and you can meet the Red Sox again, a club that has pretty much been in the same position the Braves have been in this year. High expectations, expecting to contend in their division, and sitting on just about the same record. And you turn around and lose 2 out of 3 to that club, which came in, again, just like the Padres came in having lost 6 in a row. I believe the Red Sox came in on a 5-game bender. And you're not continuing the miseries of these clubs. Instead, they're using you as a springboard to try to get their seasons right. And I know the Padres aren't quite there yet. And I'm certainly not going to point to the Red Sox and say, oh, yeah, they're fixed. They've got it all figured out. They don't even know who's going to play first base. But either way, the Braves just lost 2 out of 3 to them in this series, and nothing about that feels particularly good. And then you look at a Sunday game where Bryce Elder comes back up, and we'll talk about the circumstances of that. Obviously, the loss of AJ Smith-Shawver for the season. That's a big headline for this week in Braves baseball, and I'll get into that. But Bryce Elder came up, had some first inning, I don't know what you want to call it, jitters. But again, you cannot look at the pitching as a whole, like whether it's the starter, the relievers, the combination of the two, on a day that they hold the opposing team to 3 or fewer runs and say, well, that's the reason we lost. That guy gave up a 3-run homer. Well, it certainly was part of it, and it's a team game. You win as a team, you lose as a team. The pitching is doing everything it can, though, and I think the one thing that is apparent to Brian Snitker, Alex Anthopoulos, and anybody with a set of eyeballs or ears that's been paying attention to the Atlanta Braves this year is there is no margin for error for this pitching staff. This pitching staff, I will get into a lot more later, is not perfect. We know some of the areas that need improvement there. But you cannot look at what they've done on the mound, and defensively for that matter, and say, well, that's not working well enough. Can you improve it? You absolutely can. But they've got to find a way to score more runs. I've got some May stats as we jump into this week in Braves baseball in a little bit that I don't know if they're really going to make you feel good. They shouldn't. They didn't make me feel good writing them down. But it is what it is, and they are who they are. Because the month of May for the Braves was a tough one. And then you look at the period in time that we thought was going to be maybe this opportunity to catch fire, which is the return of Ronald Acuña Jr., and as it happened, to coincide with the second return of Spencer Strider. But again, I don't know how many times I can say it. I know I've said it a lot on the different call-ins I've done on the shows, on 929 The Game, or my show itself. 2 guys walking in can't change it all. I think you had to temper your expectations, especially with Strider coming back off of more than a year. Didn't know what kind of Ronald Acuña Jr. was going to walk through the door, but I got to say, he looks a lot like the Ronald Acuña Jr. I remember from a couple of years ago. That part's working. But it's going to take more than just the one guy to ignite this offense. And we'll delve into maybe the philosophical thinking that goes into it, because I've watched these guys work. I know that they're aware of the stats as much or more than anybody else is, though you try not to, I think, live in that space. When you have a bat in your hands and you're going to the box, it's not going to do you a whole lot of good. But I know there have been the conversations. I know that guys are trying to make the adjustments, but it's just not happening. And it's not one guy. Just like I said, it's not one guy that can fix it. It's not just one guy that's going through it, and everybody's going to have to individually fix their stuff in order to be able to put this whole thing together, like the puzzle that it is, and put together an offense that looks like that the pieces fit again. Because it feels like the Braves offense of 2023, which I think it's safe to say at this point is an outlier. It was when it happened, and it was always going to be, but did we think that they were going to fall this far from being able to be what I would refer to as a productive offense on a day-to-day basis, a continual basis? No. But it was a lineup that was designed to get on base and hit home runs. And those things are not happening. Guys aren't getting on base at a high enough clip. And even the home runs for Atlanta. I got some stats. Again, I'm going to get to them. But even the home runs aren't coming. And you've got a group of hitters that you expect some big things out of, whether that is Ronald Acuña Jr., whether that is Matt Olson, Austin Riley, Marcell Ozuna, Ozzie Albies. I mean, all of those guys I just listed to you, you would think 30 home runs, pretty possible for them any given year. That is until the events of 2024 and now into 2025, where you kind of wonder, all right, when are these guys going to be able to kind of find that form again? And it's not that they ain't looking for it. I assure you that they are. But when are they going to find it? And is it going to get late early for the Braves in terms of the National League East race? Because, again, we're beyond Memorial Day, so I feel pretty comfortable pointing at the standings and saying, all right, some things are going to have to change. Whether that's the way that it happened in 2022, whether that's the way that it happened even in 2023. The Braves got red hot in the month of June. Well, checking the calendar here, it is the month of June, and the Braves need another one of those booms to be able to kind of get their season going. And I don't know if that means they need to have a closed-door meeting. I don't know if it's just eventually the baseball gods will smile on some of the hitters that have been going through it for a while, and maybe some of the hard work and a little bit of luck will start to give them a little bit of confidence, and that thing is contagious. Everybody can feed off that kind of energy, and maybe that'll be the thing. I don't know. I'm just speaking, again, I guess philosophically here about what it could be, because I can tell you what's not happening on a regular basis is scoring runs, and if you want to beat teams consistently, you got to score more runs, and the Braves have got to figure that whole thing out. But to track it back since May 1st, 2024, the Braves are 97 and 95. Again, that's 97 and 95 over the course of, 192 ball games. They are just 2 games above 500 for the last 13 calendar months. I don't think at any point of the planning, the designing, or the execution that the Braves, whether that is Brian Snitker and the coaching staff, whether that is Alex Anthopoulos in the front office, whether it is every fan who buys a ticket to sit their butt every, 18 inches at Truist Park to watch a 500 team, barely 500 team, for 13 calendar months. But that is where the Braves find themselves. So we got to get into it. We got to get into the good, the bad, the ugly of what the Braves are and what they're not so far this year, and what they need to start doing to get out of this funk, particularly at the plate. That is where the Braves are having their most problems. Coming up on the show, we will dive into this week in Braves baseball. We will discuss all of the big stories from the week that was for Atlanta. Another major injury for this club and AJ Smith-Shawver, what that means to the rotation. And I'll be joined by Rich Waltz of Apple TV. I caught up with him a little bit earlier this week to talk a little bit about the weekend series against the Red Sox, and we'll take our trip around the big leagues. But up next, this week in Braves baseball, as it were, on From the Diamond with Grant McAuley on Sports Radio 92.9 The Game.
Taking a look around the league with more of our From the Diamond with Grant McAuley. From the Diamond is brought to you by Window Nation. Get 2 windows free with every 2 you buy and pay nothing for 2 years on Sports Radio 92.9 The Game.
Welcome back into From the Diamond with Grant McAuley on Sports Radio 92.9 The Game on a Sunday from the Kia Studios in Midtown, where the sun is setting on the weekend, and the sun has set on another series for the Braves, and unfortunately, it's one that I think that they would rather forget than to remember much more about. Another tough loss on Sunday in which the offense was unable to show up and match what was an early barrage against Bryce Elder. 3 runs in the first inning, only 1 in the bottom half, the answer for the Braves, and then it was lights out for both offenses the rest of the way through, and Atlanta finds itself once again dropping a series that was imminently winnable. Maybe that's the phrase that I'll start using on this, because there have been several imminently winnable series for the Braves against teams that were struggling, teams that are kind of in the same place that the Braves are, where, hey, we got to start to figure it out because the urgency is starting to ramp up because the month of May is almost over. We're about to get into those summer months. The weather's heating up. The next thing you know, it's the All-Star break, which, by the way, will be here in Atlanta this year. I think we'd all like to be looking forward to an event like that where the Braves might be properly represented, but you have to start kind of wondering who exactly is going to be representing the Braves on that team. And that's a secondary thing. Some folks may not care about that at all. But when you do have more All-Stars than not, it usually tells you that a few people are having good seasons. And when you have to search the roster and figure out, all right, well, who could it be? That is not exactly the exercise that you want to be involved with. So we'll put that to the side. The All-Star game, the All-Star break, just another mile marker for the Braves. And you know not far after that is a trade deadline. But where in the world is this club going to be at the trade deadline? Well, we don't know that yet. We know what the first, 58 games have looked like. And it's a club that's sitting here at 27-31, 4 games under 500 and 9.5 games out of first place after wrapping up a month of May, which was frustrating, might be the nice way to put it. The Braves went 13-14 overall, as I talked about a little bit earlier. That's not a disastrous month. But then you start to look inside how exactly they went 13-14, and there are not a whole lot of warm and fuzzy feelings there. They lost a couple of more games in the standings. Make that 3 games in the standings overall. They were 6.5 games out of first place when the month of May began. They are 9.5 games out of first place as of the 1st of June. You get the point. Things have not gone particularly well. But to keep it inside of May, inside that 13-14 record, if you peel back the layers of that onion, you will find 9 one-run losses. Now, if you want to check the DNA, the blueprint, the plans, the schematics for a winning club in any sport, winning close games has certainly got to be a part of that, the fabric of that club. And the Braves have not been able to do that, quite simply. I mean, in other, I guess, general baseball understanding, you'd like to be a 500 club on the road and a winning club at home at the very least. You know, the little tenets of winning. That's the word I'm looking for, the tenets of a winning club. You don't have that going either because the Braves this year are 10-20 away from Truist Park. That is another stat that is going to have to change. And the Braves pitching is not the problem. Now, we'll discuss the bullpen issues later on, but Atlanta's staff in the month of May turned in a 3.08 ERA. That was second best in Major League Baseball. Let me read that again. Second best in Major League Baseball. 29 other clubs in baseball, only one had a better ERA than the Braves in the month of May, but somehow Atlanta finds itself 13-14 and losing a bunch of one-run games. And those one-run losses are an offensive issue to me. It's an offensive issue. It's also an offensive issue. They've lost 8 out of 11 after getting to 500, which killed the momentum that the Braves had built and really put a damper on that month as well. And it just raises that continual question, the one that dates back all the way to last year. Can this club actually figure it out offensively? I have been asked that question, and my answer to that question is, I don't know. I don't know how you do it. I don't know exactly what's wrong. I can tell you how it looks and what goes wrong on a daily basis, but I can't tell you exactly what the causality is or what the root cause of all of it is. I'll tell you a few things it's not, in my view. It's not, hey, these guys are comfortable, they don't work. No, they're working. I see early BP on the field just about every single day that I go to Truist Park, and that's, 4 hours before the game. They're working in the cages. Sometimes I think you can work to the point where you get diminishing returns. So every once in a while, yeah, you might want to hit the reset button individually or collectively. You can work yourself into a panic. But I don't know if they're panicked either. I also don't think it's, they picked a few of these guys and gave them long-term contracts, and now they're just counting their money and don't care. I don't think that could be further from the truth. I'm just saying it out loud because I'm crowdsourcing the answers that I'm getting from the internet, which is always a dangerous place to get your information from in some cases, depending on what the source is. But these are the things you're hearing. And I'll also say, and I know that everybody, again, it's collective. You win as a team, you lose as a team. I don't know that you can point to the coaching staff and ask them to do anything that they haven't already tried or already said at this point. Brian Snitker or Tim Hires or Kevin Seitzer or any hitting instructor or anybody else that has responsibility of the club in a coaching capacity, cannot take the bat up to the plate with them. They don't need that either. This is not Little League. But I don't know what the fix is. I really don't. I don't want to waste too much more time on the show coming up with a whole bunch of theories about what it's not, because I just have no idea what it is. But I haven't seen or heard or experienced or come to the conclusion that it is just one thing that is causing 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 different hitters to struggle at the same time, to struggle so mightily that they are far away from what I would view as their normal expected level of production based on not 1 year, not just 2023. Like, for example, I'm not expecting Matt Olson to break the franchise home run record and driving 140 runs every year. But is Matt Olson capable of hitting 35 to 40 home runs and driving in 110, 120? Yes. And I'm pretty sure if you were to ask Matt Olson, not that I think he's going to sit out there and put numbers on it, that's the kind of production that he has in mind when he comes into a year. Well, right now, it's just not trending in that direction. And how bad was Atlanta's offense in the month of May? I'm glad you asked. It ranked 21st in runs scored and 20th in slugging. So a team that is built to slug is not slugging. You get these glimmers of hope. You know, games like the nightcap of the doubleheader in Philadelphia where, the home runs are flying. Got a couple guys get on base. You have a big inning. Hang a crooked number on the board a couple of different times. You beat up on Zach Wheeler, one of the best pitchers in the National League, all of baseball, honestly, who has pretty much owned every other team that he has faced this year to the tune of, I think it's 10 starts against the rest of baseball, 14 total runs that Zach Wheeler's allowed. 2 starts against the Braves, a club that I just mentioned is 21st in runs scored in the month of May, 11 runs against Zach Wheeler. So they can beat some of these guys. They can beat some of the best, but it's just not happening consistently. And so I looked inside the runners in scoring position problem, which we could waste the whole show on, and I could pull a whole bunch of other stats, but you already know the general feeling that comes from watching the Braves hit with runners in scoring position. Is just an infuriating thing. With runners in scoring position in the month of May, they had 1 home run. Now, I realize this says 2 things. Number 1, the slugging is not happening on a team that's built to slug. Number 2, maybe they're thinking too much about hitting home runs, so they can't hit home runs, and they've got a mental block, so they just had the 1 home run with runners in scoring position for the month, and that's all they were trying to do. But I don't even think that hitting a home run is just all they're trying to do. Now, they are. If you listen to this station and have the home version of the game, as a friend of mine used to say, you'd know that there was a lot of conversation about exit velocity this week. I think exit velocity is one important indicator of how successful a hitter is going to be. And I'll just leave that there. The Braves are definitely trying to hit the ball hard. And I don't think it's as simple as, we'll just turn into a bunch of slap hitters and just hit the ball the other way. And I think that the game of baseball has evolved to the point where that's just really not a realistic outcome for hitters because pitchers throw too damn hard. All of them. That's pretty much the way that works. So putting that aside, the Braves scored 69 runs with runners in scoring position in the month of May. They ranked 27th in baseball. That's just not going to get the job done. When you're hanging out with the White Sox and the Pirates and the Rockies on a leaderboard, you're not in a good spot. Mark Bowman of MLB.com just pointed out that the only teams in the National League that the Braves have a better record than are the Marlins and the Pirates and the Colorado Rockies. The Rockies are 9-50. It hasn't gotten that bad yet, but it ain't feeling good for the Braves. So, yeah, Ronald Acuña Jr. is back. But the Braves are going to need a lot more from other guys. That means Matt Olson, Austin Riley, even Marcell Ozuna to an extent, Michael Harris, Ozzie Albies. These are the players that they need more out of. You can throw Sean Murphy in there. You can ask for a little bit here and there out of some other bats that are just in there, situationally speaking. But for the most part, that's your murderer's row. And it ain't doing the job. Now, it may sound weird to lump Ozuna in with the rest of those players, so before I go any further, I do want to say this. This season has been a real oddity for him because of all the walks. So the bat gets taken out of his hands a lot. And I'm not saying that Marcell just needs to get more aggressive and start expanding his zone and becoming another black hole in this lineup. I'm certainly not saying that, but vis-a-vis all the walks, he's not having a chance to do quite as much damage. So his season has been a little bit quieter from the home runs and the run production standpoint. And to drive in runs, it takes guys getting on base. I think we've talked about that a time or two. So we talked about what the month looked like for Atlanta, but how about the rest of the National League East? The Phillies charged out in front. The Mets entered Sunday, tied for first, then took it over as the Mets grabbed a win over the Colorado Rockies. Surprise. And the Phillies lost to the Brewers again. The Braves are in 4th place. And that series in Philadelphia was just a microcosm of what the Braves month was like, because you get blanked in a 2-0 loss with Spencer Strider on the mound. You come up short in a 5-4 loss where it felt like the game was right there for you to take it away from the Phillies in game 1 of the doubleheader, and then you slug your way to a big win. And I don't think that's a false sense of security, because those big wins, they seem to come about once every week or so, maybe 10 days in some cases. And as I touched on how well the Braves pitching staff has done overall, there's just virtually no margin for error on a given night, and that's something that's going to have to change if the Braves truly want to get going. And we're going to get into the pitching coming up here shortly as we continue with this week in Braves baseball on From the Diamond with Grant McAuley on Sports Radio 92.9 The Game. But the big takeaway is that they have pitched well enough to win more games than they have. Since May the 1st of 2024, Atlanta ranks 21st in Major League Baseball in runs scored. So we're going back 13 full months. Because if you remember, April of last year, it kind of felt like, all right, the Braves are going to pick up where they left off in 2023 and be this dynamic powerhouse offense. And then it felt like somebody just turned the lights out in early May. And that was the end of that. But 21st in runs, that is how, and going back to May 1st, over that period of time, even though the Braves led the league in ERA last year, they're 97 and 95 over that stretch. Being 21st in runs scored, that's how you do that, even if you pitch extremely well. The Braves are 4th in homers over that time, though some of that heavy lifting was done a year ago, because they're 13th in Major League Baseball in home runs this year. So if they're not slugging, as we've discussed, and they're not risping, as we've discussed, the runners in scoring position thing's not happening, what are they doing? And how do they fix it? That is the conundrum. That is the question, and that is something that I don't think I'm going to be able to answer on this edition of the show, because I haven't seen exactly what it is that they need to do. And I can promise you, if somebody somewhere had figured it out for them, they would already be doing it right now. When we come back, we will turn the page on the offense, at least for the moment. We'll talk about what's going on with the Braves pitching staff, a major injury, a major return, some major struggles for the closer. How do the Braves get themselves on track to stay pitching-wise? Because goodness knows they are leaning on that group heavily thus far. We'll talk about it next on From the Diamond with Grant McAuley on Sports Radio 92.9 The Game.
Now, more From the Diamond with Grant McAuley. Brought to you by Mark Spain Real Estate. Get a guaranteed offer from Mark Spain Real Estate. 855-299-SOLD. On Sports Radio 92.9 The Game.
Welcome back to From the Diamond with Grant McAuley on Sports Radio 92.9 The Game. We continue to discuss what was a difficult week for the Atlanta Braves. It felt like maybe a couple of weeks ago we're having a very different conversation, and we were also counting down the days to the return of Ronald Acuña Jr. And it felt like maybe things were starting to fall in place for the Braves. And unfortunately, as we just got done discussing at length, the Atlanta offense is simply not doing enough to help the Braves to get through in one-run games and to do the things they need to do to just win on a regular basis. It's just not happening. And that's been a real problem for this club. What has not been a problem, though, has been what's going on the mound, by and large, for this Braves team, which has been one of the best in Major League Baseball when it comes to just regular old boring run prevention. I know, really boring to keep the other team from scoring. A lot more fun if you get to talk about the scoring that you're doing. But if you can limit the other club, you'll feel pretty good about that as well. Now, the Braves overall in 2025 have been a top 10 team in ERA in baseball. And I know that's just one of the old stats. And I know at times you can look at this pitching staff and say, well, I see the holes. And one of the holes that opened up this week, unfortunately, was done so by an injury, a season-ending injury, and that's to AJ Smith-Shawver, the 22-year-old righty, who had really seemed to be coming into his own in the Braves rotation, had a really nice run of starts, and it just felt like things were finally starting to fall into place because he was building that confidence and getting to pitch in the big leagues every fifth day. And wouldn't you know it, a bumpy start, and then a bad start in Philadelphia that was made worse when he heard a pop in his right elbow, or felt a pop, I should say. I would imagine that was probably the more correct way of how that was experienced. And this is an injury that's definitely going to sting. He was taken out in the third inning in Game 1 of the doubleheader against the Philadelphia Phillies. Tommy John surgery, obviously the likely outcome here. He could have that internal brace, but Smith-Shawver has not met with the surgeon to determine exactly what procedure it's going to be. Clearly the imaging has been looked at. The Braves have placed him on the 60-day IL. I don't think anybody is sitting around just hoping that he'll just be able to rest for 2 months and come back. That's very unlikely. And typically when a pitcher does rest in this situation, not to get off into the weeds, they end up having to have the surgery later anyway, so I'm not sure that's the route that you'd want to go. But regardless, this is a big blow for the Braves rotation, which has been at times a bit thin this year and is going to be tested and taxed even more than it has been by not having a talented young arm like AJ Smith-Shawver. So all of a sudden, Bryce Elder is going to become a lot more important. And he was okay on Sunday. Now, obviously, the 3 runs in the first inning wasn't indicative of how the whole start went, but it put the Braves down early, and the offense wasn't able to answer. But for the most part, Bryce Elder's been able to pitch you into the 6th inning, deliver quality starts on a pretty regular basis, and keep you in the ballgame. And I think that's what you're asking for from a guy who essentially becomes the de facto 5th starter at this point. And Bryce Elder has been able to, I think, prove at least this year that you can depend on him to take the ball every 5th day and keep you in a game. And that's, I think, enough out of your 5th starter if you've got everything going right with the other ones. And let's talk about some things that were going right. I don't know if anything has looked as good. Well, maybe Chris Sale has, but let's talk about Spencer Schwellenbach. The bright spot of the weekend without question as he celebrated a birthday on Saturday. He was electric against the Red Sox and helped the Braves win the only one of the 3 games that they would, with 6 1/3 innings, 5 hits, no runs, no walks, 11 strikeouts. And I think everybody took notice that Spencer Schwellenbach, he was pumped up, hitting 99 and 100 miles an hour. And multiple times, fastest pitches that he's thrown in his big league career were recorded against the Red Sox on Saturday. And obviously, when you've got as many different weapons as he has, and you're in the strike zone, and you've got that little bit extra, and I think he probably wanted to atone for the previous start against the Red Sox up at Fenway Park, and that's not an easy thing to do either, to see a club either not back-to-back times here, but close together. That can be a little bit of a challenge, but hey, Spencer Schwellenbach, it was challenge accepted. 6 1/3 shutout innings, 11 strikeouts, no walks. Now, this follows up the 7 innings, 11 strikeouts, no walks he threw against the San Diego Padres last time out. So over his last 2 starts, 22 punch-outs, no walks, and 13 1/3 innings for Spencer Schwellenbach. And I talked about this on social media. That's a good thing to see because in the prior, I believe it was 5, if not 6 starts, at least 5, 29 1/3 innings for him, only 22 strikeouts overall. So in 2 starts, he has been able to match his strikeout output of the previous 5. Now, why is that a big deal? Obviously, missing bats is a big deal. And Spencer Schwellenbach had done a really nice job of that over the course of his rookie season and for the most part early in 2025, but it did feel like the league had gotten to that point where not the book is just out, but you're going to have to make some adjustments because they've certainly been able to study your tendencies and create an attack plan for you. And Spencer Schwellenbach has, I think, answered that test or answered that call. Now, Grant Holmes all of a sudden becomes, I think, not only important, but perhaps the unheralded member of the Braves starting rotation, maybe the pitching staff at large. Because how important is he now? He's pitched into the 6th inning 9 consecutive starts. He just posted a 3.22 ERA in 6 starts in the month of May. I think that makes him pretty indispensable. Because Grant Holmes, all of a sudden, is not your 5th starter anymore. He's your 4th starter. And he has been posting. And he has been making adjustments. And I think he's done a very nice job of doing exactly what I said that Bryce Elder needs to do, and that is keeping the Braves in games. You're not asking for him to go out and be what Spencer Schwellenbach was his last time out, although Grant Holmes can also miss some bats. And you're not asking anybody to go out and do their best Chris Sale impression, though you'll take it. But I think that Grant Holmes, all of a sudden, where most people might have thought, okay, we got Smith-Shawver, maybe somebody else comes into the picture, all of a sudden Grant Holmes is just in the bullpen just like that. I don't know that he's going to be going to the bullpen really anytime soon. I don't think that there's enough depth in the Braves system to push him at this point. And he's pitching extremely well, which is more to the point here. Now, Spencer Strider, I felt like, took a step forward against the Philadelphia Phillies in the opener of that 3-game series. And again, the Braves may have lost that series. They may have lost that game by a 2-0 score. He's still not back to his normal self, but he's a work in progress. And I thought there were some encouraging signs. So a lot of swing and miss on the slider. The fastball, I don't know, had a little bit more life than it did in that first start against the Nationals. But 4 2/3 innings, even with just 1 hit allowed and 1 run allowed, that's not the kind of outings that Spencer Strider has in mind. He did walk 4 guys. He struck out 7. Obviously, the hit by pitch of Bryce Harper, which, if you think that was intentional, I don't know what to tell you other than seek help. But that followed up that start against the Nationals where he went 4 1/3 innings and allowed 4 runs to Washington on 6 hits and only struck out 3 and just didn't look comfortable. And that's where I kind of thought, sitting around for a month after having to have done the 12 months of grueling rehab to get yourself back on a major league mound, and then having to sit around and rehab a hamstring injury and not have maybe a minor league rehab start for pad. I don't know. It's hindsight, but maybe that's just one of those little things that might have been a little bit more helpful, because I don't think in most cases you want to be trying to figure it out against big league lineups. Even if you've got experience, even if you're a guy who can get the kind of results that Spencer Strider, I believe, can and will get as he gets more comfortable going along, I don't know that that was necessarily the best way to do it, but that ship has obviously sailed, and Spencer Strider did look better last time out, and that was the point of this whole thing. Now, Chris Sale has quieted all the early season noise by pitching like Chris Sale again. That's an easy way to do it. And the Braves had to have that as well, obviously. His 1.42 ERA his last 7 starts includes 54 punch-outs, 12 walks, and 44 in a third innings. I mean, you're putting a sub-150 ERA out there for 7 starts. You're figuring, all right, this is a great run. You're going 6-1, 7-0. Let's go. Instead, the Braves are just 4-3 in those 7 starts, and Chris Sale is 3-1 with 3 no decisions. He's doing his part, though, and this again points back to the offense, which I know they got him a ton of runs in that game in Philadelphia to salvage the series finale, but Chris Sale seems to be the guy on the staff that's getting the short end, even more short than some of the other run support of other members of the staff. Now, the bullpen, I think we need to talk about for at least a couple minutes here, because it's clearly missing some pieces. I don't need to go over what having Joe Jimenez in this mix would do for this club. Obviously, it would improve it. I don't need to go over what having brought in Tanner Scott would have done for this club. Obviously, that would have improved it. Jeff Hoffman, I know, was on the list of Braves' possible acquisitions over the winter. That was scuttled because of concerns about his shoulder. He's closing in Toronto. I think the Braves would have had him starting. Who knows what factor he would have really been? I don't know. It's another capable arm, though, and you'd like to have more options than not, but he's clearly not here. That's not going to help either. But it's good to see Raisel Iglesias on Sunday throw what I felt like was a little bit of a more encouraging 9th inning. And you're going to need more of that, because as you look back at Raisel, and obviously we talked a lot about the home runs, but just in general, he's been scored upon in 6 of his last 9 appearances since the 8th of May. So going back about a calendar month. And you might be thinking, wow, it's almost a month, just short, a little around 4 weeks, and he's only made 9 appearances. Well, I think that speaks to the Braves kind of trying to stay away from him at times to help him work through this whole thing. Now, the slider has been the big culprit for home runs. He's allowed 5 home runs on sliders this year. He's allowed more home runs from the 9th inning on than any other pitcher in Major League Baseball, and that is a niche stat right there. But it basically just tells you no other closer or high-leverage reliever is getting homered on at the rate that Raisel Iglesias is in the 9th inning, because it's not just blowing a game. It's not just blowing a save. It's allowing a home run that just, I think, sends a bigger and more unfortunate message for the morale of the club on any given day, especially when it becomes a repeat performance type of thing. Now, I think just based on Sunday and some of the other outings I've seen, I mean, Raisel Iglesias still has it up his sleeve. It's just, can he figure out the ways to be more effective? And ditching that slider for a while may not be the worst idea as far as that's concerned. But a clean inning on Sunday, that's good to see. Now, as Raisel Iglesias has been struggling, I think a lot of people have come up with their own theories of who should be closing for the Braves, and there were a bunch of folks who were pointing at Daze Hernandez and saying he should be closing. He should have been closing 3 weeks ago. Well, to that I say not so fast. And I wanted to get to this before something happened. That sometimes you just don't want to be on the right track about something, but I was just looking at Daze Bell's numbers and thinking, if you're running, and I posted this on social media, you can follow me at Grant McAuley on most platforms if you want to find me. This was a particular post from X, that if you're running about a 6.5 walks per 9 and only striking out about 6.5 batters per 9, that's a lot of free base runners and not missing enough bats, and you're basically depending on other clubs to basically not get hits. Which, if you got great stuff, which Daze Bell does, he throws high 90s, can touch triple digits, has a wipeout slider, he looks the part at times of what a high-leverage reliever or 9th inning guy can be. And the Braves need him to be that. There's no question about that. But then you start to see some of the extra base runners all come home to roost against him against Philadelphia, or up in Philadelphia. He allowed 2 runs in his 2 appearances, walked 4 guys, and hit another. and was charged with a loss in one of those games. And I felt like this was a case where a lineup decided we're just going to be more selective and we're going to force this guy into the strike zone, and he wasn't able to do it. Now, he made an appearance, last night? Faced 2 hitters, struck them both out. Looked great. You just need to see more of that. You just need to see more of him on the attack, getting around the zone, getting ahead, and then putting guys away, because the strikeouts weren't there either. It wasn't just the walks. It was the lack of swing and miss that had me a little bit concerned about daze ball. So hopefully he can make that adjustment, because you can't beat yourself. And more to the case, as we've talked about time and time again, week after week, segment after segment on this show, the margin for error for the Braves pitching staff is basically razor thin. Now, Dylan Lee, to a lesser extent, has been homer-prone at times. You certainly can't have your key guys struggling with that issue. But for him, it's just been more of the untimely homer here and there, but he's allowed 5 across 25 innings. So up from his career norm and up from what you need from a guy that I think you have to count on in high leverage as well. Pierce Johnson has basically been the Braves' best reliever in 2025, which I think leads some people to wonder, can Dylan Dodd play a role moving forward? Now, he was optioned down for Bryce Elder, but I think Dodd has looked great in AAA. 24 strikeouts, 1 walk in his last 18 appearances. That, my friends, that will play. When we come back, we're going to turn our attention to what else is happening across Major League Baseball. I got a chance to catch up with Rich Waltz, who is the voice of AppleTV. He called the game on Friday at Truist Park between the Braves and the Red Sox. I'll share my chat with him next on From the Diamond with Grant McAuley as we take our trip around the big leagues here on Sports Radio 92.9 The Game.
Now, back to more From the Diamond. From the Diamond is brought to you by Window Nation. Get 2 windows free with every 2 you buy and pay nothing for 2 years. Sports Radio 92.9 The Game.
Welcome back to From the Diamond with Grant McAuley here on Sports Radio 92.9 The Game. We are live from the Kia Studios, wrapping up the weekend for the Braves and also continuing our trip around the big leagues, which will actually, ironically, I guess, take us back to Truist Park and back in time. I got to catch up with Rich Waltz, who is the voice of the AppleTV broadcast. He was the play-by-play man for the Friday night broadcast that kicked off this series between the Braves and the Red Sox. Rich is no stranger to the National League East. He was a longtime voice of the Miami Marlins, so it's great to catch up with him.
Grant, thanks for the invitation. This should be a lot of fun. These are 2 flagship franchises in Major League Baseball, and neither of them are real happy where they are. So, it'll be an interesting series for sure.
Not only are neither team really where they want to be, but I don't think either fan base is feeling how they want to feel about their club this year either. And as you know, on this show, we spend a lot of time getting granular on the Braves, what's gone right, and maybe more so on what's gone wrong. But what's the view outside of the Atlanta bubble on this team from you and your vantage point, maybe folks around baseball you've talked to?
Well, look, the big picture is Acuña's been out. Now he's back. I watched on MLB Network Tom Verducci and Ron Darling in a panel talk about the Braves, and they were pointing towards the Phillies series. And it was like, hey, it's go time for the Braves. Strider's back, Acuña's back, they're at full strength. Obviously, last year, injuries slowed them down throughout the season. Mm-hmm. And this is not breaking news. The Phillies are really, really good. Yeah. So, look, and I'm sure there's head-scratching from Braves fans and Red Sox fans, but for the Braves, they want to see more than this. Sitting where they are right now doesn't feel great, but there's some history in terms of Brian Snitker and the Braves making late-season runs or second-half runs. You go back to 21, obviously. That's the World Championship year. You go back to 22. There were something like 10.5 back in June. Yeah. Of the postseason, and ended up winning 101 games. So it's interesting. I just had the Diamondbacks and the Cardinals, 2 teams that are kind of in a similar boat. Fan bases are like, well, wait a minute. Are we any good, or are we going to be trading people? That was the Cardinals fans 3 weeks ago. Then they went on a long win streak, and all of a sudden it's like, hell yeah, our young players are really good, and we're right in it. And the Diamondbacks are like, can we just transfer out of the National League West, please? Yeah. Because it's, as the Braves will tell you, that's not a good place to be. I think they've really taken it on the chin from both the Dodgers and the Padres. So when you get to July, mid-July, 3rd week in July, I think that's a better barometer of what you are and who you are. But neither of these fan bases want to wait that long.
Yeah, and we've gotten to that Memorial Day checkpoint that, for me, is kind of that first one where you look at the standings and think, okay, we're about a third of the way through the season. What do we have? What are we? What are we not? What do we need? All those questions that you'll end up answering over the next, 2 months to come leading up to the trade deadline. But as you pointed out, I mean, injuries have been a story around Atlanta a lot more than anyone would like, especially in 2024. They just got Ronald Acuña Jr. back after a year-long absence. Spencer Strider back in the saddle. I think it's safe to say that 29 other teams would love to have those kind of players walking through the door after the kind of challenging start the Braves got off to. But as you also pointed out, this has been a team that can turn it around and has done it in the past. It just, I think, after the 2024 disappointment and all the injuries and all the things that went on with it, I think that maybe the fan base at the very least is a little bit unsure of what to expect from the Braves going forward because they just haven't been able to see enough results and consistency to make them believe that that run is there.
Well, look, I mean, if you're looking to make a run, you have to have horses, right? And the Braves have that in their lineup. Ozuna's been terrific for the past, year and a half or whatever it's been. Matt Olson can carry a team when he's hot. Austin Riley can do that. Acuña can absolutely do that. Albies is starting to hit. So the pieces are there, the guys there, the track records are there to get that done. I watched the doubleheader yesterday, and I'm like, oh, my God, just maybe the Braves should just leave the field now so they don't get any more injuries, right? I mean, you lose a starting pitcher, you lose an outfielder in Fairchild, and then Allen gets hit in the hands. From the last report I saw, X-rays are negative, which is great. My point is, look, they have the firepower, and you think weather gets hotter, more runs are on the way. But they're going to have to figure out the back of the bullpen. Iglesias has got a great track record, but it's not working. You can't give up. It's one thing to not hold leads. It's another thing to give up home runs after the ninth inning, which I think he's given up more than anybody in baseball from the ninth inning on. I don't know what the answer is there. I think you can fix your bullpen probably easier in once you get into July and there are teams out of the race and have a really good middle reliever or two that they want to shop or something like that. But, yeah. And, look, I think the schedule, they haven't seen the Mets yet, and they get the Mets, I think, 7 times in the month of June. So this is a good weekend, a barometer weekend for both.
Yeah, it definitely is. And it feels like in some ways, Rich, that the Braves and the Red Sox are in similar spots, doesn't it? Because they've had the ups and downs. They're searching for that consistency. There's reason to be hopeful, I think, coming into the year, even if the expectations kind of varied and may have swung a little bit more toward the Braves. The Red Sox seem to be a team on the rise, but they're kind of going through their own stuff this year, aren't they?
Yeah, and it's really fascinating to me, too, because, as I mentioned earlier, there's flagship franchises in Major League Baseball. I consider the Braves to be one. I consider the Red Sox to be one. The Dodgers are certainly one. The Mets are kind of, some years, yeah, some years not. Obviously, the Yankees are there, too. The difference between the Braves and the Red Sox fan bases and plights, if you want to say that. I mean, the Braves have been to 7 consecutive postseasons, right? 6 National League East titles. The Red Sox haven't been to a postseason in 3 years.
Yeah.
I mean, I had to double check that, and I'm like, wow. And as you said, they're kind of on the rise. They're in a weird spot for one of those flagship franchises in that their fan base and a lot of the headlines aren't about the guys on the field right now. It's about the guys they want on the field, the young core. 3 of the top prospects in baseball going at the end of last year were in their farm system. 2 of them are here, and everyone's clamoring for the third. And we're talking about Marcelo Meyer, who's seeing time at third, Christian Campbell, who may have to clean up the mess of first base and Devers not wanting to go to first base.
Yeah. And
then Roman Anthony is the number 1 overall prospect in all the scouting publications and MLB pipeline. He's a 21-year-old outfielder, but their outfield's really good, so they don't really have a spot for him in the outfield. That, to me, is an interesting place for the Boston Red Sox to be. No postseason for 3 seasons, and, hey, we can't wait for the kids to get here. That, to me, sounds more like the Cincinnati Reds or the – you know what I'm saying? A mid-range team that's the Guardians or somebody like that that's not spending $230 million or whatever they're spending on their payroll. That's one difference, I think, between where these two teams are. I do like the fact that the Braves have somewhat of a youth infusion as well and some good young players, and Baldwin is a terrific story.
Yeah.
That's kind of my read of the two franchises and where they are at this point, record-wise, and the way they're playing right now. The Braves got beat up physically and somewhat mentally in Philly, but Boston just had a heartbreaking series in Milwaukee where they got walked off on twice in extra innings.
Yeah, no, it seems like you can't sometimes get out of your own way is the way it felt, I think, for the Braves in Philadelphia, maybe for the Red Sox over there in Milwaukee. And some of the things that the Red Sox are dealing with, as you kind of laid out the 30,000-foot view of what's happening on the field, but this is a club that went out and spent money. They got Alex Bregman. They traded for Garrett Crochet. Then they had to go through the Rafael Devers. We don't want you to play the field until we need you to play the field. And then he doesn't want to play the field. And then Bregman gets hurt. So if Devers had just been at third base and they'd never gotten Bregman, would all of this happen? I don't know. But, it's the butterfly effect of all those things. But it doesn't sound like Roman Anthony's going to be the answer at first base, at least not yet. They haven't hit that panic button. But there's a lot of excitement about him coming up and joining some of the other top prospects that have made a splash already for the Red Sox. And heading into this weekend and heading into the month of June, I'm sure they're looking for the same thing the Braves are. That's some consistency, maybe for the baseball gods to smile on them once in a while in a close game, because the Braves, I can tell you this, have played more one-run games than any team in Major League Baseball, and their record in those games is not great. I believe it's 9-14 at this point. So just a tough way to lose. And you mentioned with Raisel Iglesias going through it, there's a lot of focus on the bullpen, but I can't help but look back at this, Rich. Even with Ronald Acuña Jr. walking in, he's just one guy. Even if he's the best guy in baseball at times when he gets going, this offense has got to give the pitching staff a little bit more to work with. I feel like that's really been the Achilles heel for the Braves for a while.
Runs, right?
Yeah.
I mean, you can break it down any way you want and any metric you want, but you got to score runs. And that's the kind of the puzzle here is that, again, you run through the lineup, Acuña, Ozuna, Olsen, Riley. Albies is hot now, so he's hitting. Murphy's back. Is he going to hit and drive in runs? There should be more runs for this team. And production at the bottom of the orders. That's another thing. When you have a guy like Acuña leading off, and we just talked about this last week, Ryan Spilborghs and I, because we had the Diamondbacks and the Cardinals, and Corbin Carroll is the leadoff hitter for the Diamondbacks. But he's even more so at times than Marte. He's their best slugger in terms of home runs and stuff like that. If you have production in that bottom third of your lineup, I think it's so important when you have an Acuña or an Ohtani or Corbin Carroll or a run producer, a threat in the leadoff spot, because that's when, it's like you talk about, what does Acuña bring as a leadoff hitter? He's essentially a leadoff hitter just once.
Yeah. And
then all of a sudden, he's a middle of the order guy if your 7, 8, 9 guys are doing something. And that's, the Dodgers have great depth in, everywhere. Even, short A, I'm sure they've got 8 guys that can really hit. But having that, for the Braves, having somebody in front of Acuña is key, I think. Because if you're going to say, hey, yeah, Olsen get hot, Ozuna get hot, Riley get hot. Well, they're in the middle of the order, and they're kind of surrounding each other. You want somebody on base when Acuña comes to the plate. And that's a little bit of the puzzle as it goes on.
Yeah, and maybe that's a role that Michael Harris can play as well as he did in 2022 and 2023, though the Braves, I think, would love to have that bat a little bit higher in the lineup. There is something to be said for something that works, and I believe the phrase goes, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. But the Braves have been trying to fix this lineup for a while. So putting all that aside, we got a little bit of insight on both the Braves and the Red Sox. But, Rich, I don't want to let you get out of here without having a chance to talk about the Apple TV broadcasts that you're involved in and all the other stuff that you've got going on across Major League Baseball.
Well, look, the Apple TV broadcasts are a whole lot of fun. As a play-by-play announcer and as someone who's worked for MLB Network and Fox and done team games and stuff like that, the Apple TV shows are just a blast for a lot of reasons. Number one, it's a full-blown national show. Everybody travels. We got a full crew. Nobody's remote. Nobody's, in their basement calling the game or anything like that. We're all here. And that, I think, is paramount in terms of the access that we get, the cool things that we get to do, the cameras. Then there's the tech. Apple is Apple, right? So stuff's going to look good. The games are produced by MLB Network and Apple. And so you've got MLB Network people who know baseball and are really, really good at producing it and directing it in the truck. You've got toys that Apple likes and that MLB Network likes. You know, some of the cameras and the access, the camera on the field will get places that you don't normally see in a lot of telecasts. You know, I get to work with great analysts, Ryan Spielborgs, Dontrell Willis, and tonight David Ross is just going to be a blast. I was such a big David Ross fan. I was the longtime TV voice of the Marlins. So I saw a lot of David Ross in a lot of different places. And every place I saw him, everybody loved him.
Yep.
So I'm excited for that as well. But the Apple stuff is really cool. I'm really fortunate to be part of it. I know that Braves fans and Red Sox fans, there'll be some that say, we want to listen to Dave O'Brien. We want to listen to BG and CJ and all that. But there's something to be said for being able to take what we just did, the view from above, and be critical and talk about, hey, what's wrong with this team? What's good with this team? What do you see with this team? Sometimes when you're not surrounded by a team, that's why as a broadcaster, and they aren't around as much as they used to be, one of the great sources for me was always advanced scouts, other teams' advanced scouts.
Yeah.
Because they would watch your team for like a week or 2 weeks, and you would pick their brain, like, what do you see? And they'll see stuff that you didn't see because you're so involved in your team and all of that. So I think we'll get a little bit of that. I'm really interested to hear David Ross's take on both franchises, of which he's held in high regard both in Boston and Atlanta.
Yeah, should be pretty exciting stuff. Appreciate you making the time, and definitely look forward to seeing you out at Truist Park as Apple TV handles the Braves and Red Sox on Friday night. Rich, have a great call, and look forward to talking to you again soon.
Grant, thanks.
Well, great stuff with Rich Waltz. I got to catch up with him on Friday prior to the game. Braves and Red Sox, of course, that series this weekend at Truist Park, and the Apple TV broadcast, which we have become accustomed to over the past couple of years, as you have to go a variety of places if you want to follow your team for all 162 games on television. But Rich, one of the good guys in baseball, I encourage you to keep up with everything that he is doing as part of that team. When we come back, we will hit some of the biggest headlines from the week that was in Major League Baseball. It comes your way next on From the Diamond with Grant McAuley on Sports Radio 92.9 The Game.
Taking a look around the league with more of our From the Diamond with Grant McAuley. From the Diamond is brought to you by Window Nation. Get 2 windows free with every 2 you buy and pay nothing for 2 years on Sports Radio 92.9 The Game.
Welcome in to From the Diamond with Grant McAuley on Sports Radio 92.9 The Game. We're live from the Kia Studios in Midtown. We continue our look around the big leagues. It was great to chat with Rich Waltz a little bit earlier this weekend. Obviously, the series didn't play out the way that the Braves wanted it to, and a lot of the things we talked about remain true. When's it all going to click into place for them? And clearly the Boston Red Sox can use all the series wins they can get, because this has been a disappointing and weird season for them as well. But we will stick a pin in what's going on with the Braves. We will get back to it. We got to talk about Ronald Acuña Jr. a little bit and some other stuff, including what the upcoming schedule is going to be for this club, which is, I don't think, going to be the kindest to them in the month of June. But I'll discuss that a little bit later. Let's take our trip around the big leagues with a few other stories that caught my attention for this week. And whenever I'm preparing for a show, I'll spend a lot of time, obviously, scrolling social media, seeing what kind of things are going on across the league, and reading a whole host of articles and listening to a lot of great podcasts out there, which, by the way, if you haven't already subscribed to From the Diamond, you can do so wherever you get your podcasts. You can also find it on the Odyssey app, where you can get all the stuff 92.9 The Game has for you each and every day. But one of the great sources for baseball research is Sarah Langs of MLB.com. What does it mean to be in first place on June 1st was the recent piece that she posted. Again, this is from MLB.com. It takes a look at the leaders and what the postseason field looks like when you start to look at, all right, well, is this, getting past Memorial Day, getting to the month of June, is your success predicated on maybe having the opportunity to be in first place at this time? To make a long story short, they're going to leave out the 2020 season because clearly not much was going on June the 1st during the COVID year. But what does it mean to be in first place since 1996, the first full season with at least one wild card in each league after the 95 campaign was limited to 144 games because of the strike? So now we're, I guess, putting that one aside as well. 100 of the 168 eventual division champions held at least a share of the division lead entering June the 1st. So 60% of the division winners were in first place on June the 1st. So let's pull out our handy-dandy standings and take a look at what that would mean, because you're thinking, The New York Mets have a 1-game lead over the Philadelphia Phillies. They look like a playoff club, but so do the Phillies, so that's not really decided yet. The Chicago Cubs have a 4-game lead over the St. Louis Cardinals in the Central as of 6 o'clock, let's call it, on Sunday evening anyway. The Dodgers, a 3-game lead over the Padres. The Padres are under 500 at this point, so, the Padres are 3 games out, I should say. They've been scuffling a little bit and haven't been playing as well as they did since their epic start. They're under 500 since that point. That's what I was going for. Then you've got the Giants, and then the under 500 Arizona Diamondbacks. I still look at all 4 of those clubs, and I think you can't rule them out. Maybe not to win the division, obviously, in some cases, but in the playoff field. Then you go to the American League. You got the Yankees with a 5-game cushion on the Toronto Blue Jays, 6 ahead of the Devil Rays, as they were, the Rays, as they call them now, and the Red Sox are 8 games back through Sunday. The Baltimore Orioles, who I would have thought would be right in the thick of this whole thing, they're 13.5 games back. In the Central, you find the best team in Major League Baseball, record-wise anyway. It's the Detroit Tigers, 39-21. We're going to talk a little more about the Tigers as we go along. But they got a 6-game lead over the Guardians, 6.5-game lead over the Twins, 8-game lead over the Royals. And again, I look at those 4 teams and I think, it wouldn't surprise me if any of them reach the postseason. They're not all going to get there, I wouldn't imagine. It'd be quite the run, especially with what's going on in the East typically. But we'll see. They're all hopefuls, and they're all over 500. Then you get out west, and you've got a dogfight going on between the Mariners, who are in action already this afternoon, are still in action this evening, and the Houston Astros, a virtual tie for first place out there. And then 3.5 games back are the Texas Rangers, who have looked like perhaps one of the worst hitting teams in Major League Baseball for most of this year, and has already fired its hitting coach, but I digress. That's not really the most important thing, and not what we're necessarily honing in on here. But 60% of the division winners were in first place on June the 1st. Now, that certainly doesn't bode well for the Atlanta Braves, who are sitting in 4th place now as of June the 1st. But you have to pay special attention to the Yankees, the Tigers, the Mariners, the Phillies, the Mets, the Cubs, and the Dodgers, because each of those were the current division leaders heading into June, and the NL East was tied atop. And now the Mets have obviously stepped out in front. 5 of the 6 division leaders on June 1st last year went on to win their division. In the American League, the Yankees and Guardians both did. While the Mariners, who led the West in June, missed the postseason altogether in a what I would call a fantastic collapse, as the Astros managed to remind us that just when you think you can shovel dirt on what they're doing, they figure out a way to get there. In the NL, the Phillies, the Brewers, the Dodgers each had first place entering June, and they went on to win the division. There's been just one season in this span, this is dating back to 1996, where all 6 division champs held the lead entering June 1st, or a share of it, and that was 1998. 16 of the 28 World Series winners, excluding 2020, led their divisions entering June, including the Dodgers last year. So some interesting stats there, just to say that if you're a first-place club and you stay in first place, you get into October, good things can happen. But obviously, with a lot of baseball left to be played, stranger things have happened. We saw it in 2022 when the Braves were 10.5 games back. I don't know that June 1st was necessarily it, but they were 10.5 games back at one point and went on to beat the Mets, thanks in large part to some head-to-head battles in September, and win the division. So things can happen. Pennant races are fun. I mean, the Mariners last year, you thought they would probably be heading into October. The Astros didn't look like they were going to be going anywhere after their terrible start. And baseball has a way of changing those plans, as it were. So the takeaway, I guess, from this one, if you look at the current division winners, according to Sarah Langs, each has had a share of the lead entering June, at least one other time since 2021, except for the Tigers, who were in first place on June 1st for the first time in 11 years. So we're talking about a very, very different version of the Detroit Tigers. And I'm going to tell you, that is one of the most fun clubs. And I love the stories of teams that nobody was expecting them to be there. It's not a lack of talent. It might have been a lack of experience, but the expectations just weren't built in there. And the Tigers kind of turned the American League on its ear last year to get into that October picture. And they look like they've gotten even better this year. So it should be interesting to see exactly how that all plays out. Now, another team that is probably not going to be heading to the postseason, but certainly beat up on a team that would like to. The Washington Nationals blasted the Arizona Diamondbacks on Saturday, and now the Diamondbacks we'll get to are having a different kind of pain today. But Arizona gave up 10 runs in the first inning to Washington on Saturday. 9 of those scored before the Diamondbacks were able to record an out. Now, I don't think I need to remind anybody around these parts what it feels like to have a team drop 10 runs on you in the first inning. But watching it happen to somebody else, I don't know. There's a certain catharsis that could be had there. The Nationals' first 11 batters reached base, and they scored those 9 runs before the D-backs got an out. That is the second most runs scored before an out was recorded in a game since 1961. So we're dating ourselves on back there. And the only other time that a team scored more runs before an out was recorded was the Red Sox plating 10 runs against the then Florida Marlins on June 27th, 2003, that according to Elias Sports. So you don't see that kind of thing too terribly often. You hope to never see it if you're on the receiving end of it, obviously. But then things went from kind of bad to worse for the Arizona Diamondbacks today. Corbin Burnes left his start against Washington with what was an apparent arm injury. Clearly one of the big signings of the offseason. Burnes, who's 30 years old, has a 2.72 ERA entering the day through 10 starts, signed a 6-year, $210 million free agent contract with Arizona over the winter. And depending on the severity of this injury, as he does head into his 30s, this deal could obviously take a very, very different look. But you kind of thought, with what Arizona's been able to do the last couple of years, go get another bona fide ace, put him at the front of that rotation. Maybe this thing will have a way of working out. But it looks like Corbin Burnes could be down for a while. We'll see what the outcome is of that arm injury. Let's talk about another fun story. How about Cal Raleigh? You might be saying, who? If you're a baseball fan, you're probably not. But if you're just a casual fan listening out there, that may not be a name that registers to you because he plays his baseball for the Seattle Mariners. He is their catcher, and he is your Major League Baseball home run leader. Affectionately nicknamed Big Dumper, for reasons I'll let you Google rather than getting into on the show at this point. He is leading Major League Baseball with 23 homers, hit another one on Sunday. He's got 4 go-ahead homers in the 7th inning or later, most in Major League Baseball. So not only is he hitting quantity, he's hitting some quality as well. And here's some company for Cal Raleigh. First catcher in Major League Baseball to reach 20 home runs before the end of May ever. So that's a club of 1. Just the 29th overall time any player has done that in baseball history. That's 20 or more home runs before the end of May. And his 22 home runs before June 1st are tied for the second most in Mariners history, trailing only Ken Griffey Jr., who had 24 homers in 1997. And I would say, as a kid who grew up watching a lot of baseball in the 90s, anytime you're on a list with Ken Griffey Jr. that's about home runs, you've probably done pretty well for yourself. So Cal Raleigh continues to be one of the bigger, better stories in Major League Baseball. Came into the day on a 63-homer pace, American League record. We made a big deal about it a couple of years ago. Some people thought it was kind of stupid since it's not the overall MLB record, but I still think it kind of matters. It was Roger Maris all the way up until Aaron Judge passed him a couple of years ago. And could Cal Raleigh really hit 60 homers? For a catcher to do it, man, that would be one heck of a feat. Obviously, he could DH some too, but what it would take to get there will be quite the push. And we know that paces are not necessarily the most reliable thing to hang our hats on. Let's talk about one more story. I want to get back to the Detroit Tigers. Tarik Skubal. My question is this guy getting better? And I guess the follow-up question would be how? But let me give you some numbers for the reigning AL Cy Young Award winner who's having his way with opposing lineups yet again in 2025. His last 2 starts have been masterful, which is just, any old day for him, it seems like, or every 5th day for him. 16 innings, 4 hits, no walks, 20 strikeouts, scoreless baseball. Had a 9-inning complete game shutout of Cleveland with 13 punch-outs, then 7 scoreless against the Royals on Saturday, 7 more strikeouts for him. Now I went back to the last 10 starts for Tarik Skubal. A 1.66 ERA with 89 strikeouts and 3 walks. That is not a typo. 89 strikeouts and 3 walks. Almost a 30-to-1 ratio for a starting pitcher. So he is filling up the strike zone. He is getting tons of swings and misses. And he's a Triple Crown winner a year ago. He was 18-4 with a 2.39 ERA, 228 strikeouts to win that Cy. I think he's the front runner for the American League Cy Young again this year. And the Tigers, as I mentioned earlier, best team in Major League Baseball record-wise after surging in the second half for that improbable trip to the postseason. I think they're hungry. I think they're ready for more. Detroit 39-21. The Mets and Cubs are both 37-22. The Dodgers 36-22 as of this show. The Yankees 35-22. Those are your best records. And that is your trip around the big leagues. When we come back, we're going to talk about a few different Braves topics we haven't gotten to yet. Ronald Acuña Jr. is going to lead things off for us. We'll also talk about some of the other key hitters in the Braves lineup and the upcoming schedule. All of that comes your way next on From the Diamond with Grant McAuley on Sports Radio 92.9 The Game.
Back to Grant McAuley for more From the Diamond. Brought to you by Mark Spain Real Estate. Get a guaranteed offer from Mark Spain Real Estate. 855-299-SOLD. On Sports Radio 92.9 The Game.
This is From the Diamond. I am Grant McAuley. These are the Kia Studios. Sports Radio 92.9 The Game. Wrapping up another edition of From the Diamond. As I mentioned a little bit earlier, you can find the show wherever you get your podcast. Just search for From the Diamond. You can also find it on the Odyssey app. So make sure you're subscribed and find the show. Connect with the show in all those great places. You can follow me on social media on most platforms at Grant McAuley. You can also find the show at From the Diamond _ on Twitter. And at From the Diamond on Instagram. You can also find it on Facebook, and FromTheDiamond.com is a great repository for all the links for all the things that I am doing throughout the course of a baseball season. Most of those focused on what's happening with the Atlanta Braves. So we will continue to discuss what was a disappointing weekend and what is, of course, to come for the Braves, which is not going to get too terribly much easier here in the month of June. But let's start out with something I think everybody can agree is a good thing for this club, and that is that Ronald Acuña Jr. is back with this team. And he looks like his old self. And that's something I think certain pockets of the fandom was probably very curious about. I think everybody, and when I talked about in February, March, April, and all the way into May, what should we expect from Ronald Acuña Jr., it was my opinion, maybe temper those expectations, at least early, and see what he looks like. Because if you remember, even in 2024, Ronald was off to a slow start before the knee injury. Now, I think a lot of folks might forget that he kind of tweaked the knee in spring training a year ago, because clearly the problem at the end of May was season ending. But I don't know. Maybe that was part of the issue going on there in the early going of the season. But either way, he is back from his knee injury, and he looks like his old self. He's hitting homers, he's getting on base, and obviously those are things that are helpful for a lineup that desperately needs it. Now, quiet day for Ronald on Sunday as the Braves lost 3-1 to the Red Sox. He was 0 for 4, a couple of punch-outs for him. But hitting .324 with an OPS north of 1,000, 3 home runs through his 9 games back thus far. Those are some Ronald Acuña Jr. numbers. You got your leadoff hitter batting well over 300 with an OPS of, 1,042. You're doing pretty well there. Now, that said, it's not going to automatically fix everything in the Braves lineup. I think we've talked about that. It's great to have Ronald back, but that's just one piece of this puzzle. They need some big hits to start coming through. And Matt Olson and Austin Riley, I think, are 2 of the biggest bats that you need those hits from. Now, Olson, I saw this stat on the TV broadcast a couple of nights ago, or Saturday, actually, so yesterday. That's how time works. He was 4 for 39 in his previous opportunities with runners in scoring position before getting the Braves on the board against Boston on Saturday with a double. And you look at Matt Olson, I talked about this earlier, and I've also, gotten into just a minute ago about how dangerous paces can be. They don't necessarily tell you what's going to look like at the end of the season, but I do think it's a nice barometer for how successful is somebody right now if we put it in the context of 162 games. Well, for Matt Olson, that pace is 34 homers and 88 runs batted in. Now, the homers sound fine. He's got 12 of those this year, but those runs batted in, those are pretty light for a guy that plays every single day and is typically found in either the 3rd spot or the 4th spot of the lineup. If those guys right there are not knocking in 100+ and they're playing every day, then they're probably not having a great year. And I know RBIs are kind of that old school stat that doesn't take into account, I can't knock in runs if nobody gets on base, and that's fair. But then we get back to the runners in scoring position and stats like 4 for 39 skid there. And Matt Olson was kind of the, not the punching bag, but he's kind of the poster child of the recent struggles for the Braves with runners in scoring position. And that's, again, this is a team sport. It's not necessarily fair to look at one guy and be like, well, he's the one that failed. And you certainly don't need to get down the rabbit hole and, relitigate what went on when the Braves changed first baseman a few years ago. That ship has sailed. It's done. Matt Olson is a much better player than he is showing right now. But Matt Olson also went through it in 2024, as did many Braves hitters. And I think it's just a heightened sense of awareness for what's not happening. And I think that the players are very well aware of what's not happening. Now, you look at Austin Riley. He is batting .305 with runners in scoring position, but only 2 home runs in those spots. And it's not all about the homers, again, with runners in scoring position. I think we've documented that. But basically, none of them are coming. There was one home run last month with a runner in scoring position. And that's just a crazy stat. Like, it's a weird stat. And it has a lot of offshoots of different thoughts. But you're telling me nobody's hitting a clutch home run on this team? That's not a great sign. It's just not. When you look at Austin Riley overall, 33 RBI thus far this year. That's a 94 RBI pace. He's also played every single day. That's close, but not quite there. And we talked at length about Ozzie Albies, who really had a slow start to the season. You want to talk about a punching bag for a lot of the Braves' offensive struggles? I felt like Ozzie was getting it more than just about anybody, this side of Michael Harris, who I'll talk about in a moment. But a 13-game hitting streak that got snapped on Friday. He's also starting to draw some walks, though. And that may not sound like a big deal, but let me tell you what is a big deal. Ozzie Albies pushing a 400 on base out over the last couple of weeks. That's encouraging. That's what you need to see. The hit rates have also been better for him in terms of exit velocities. And no, we're not going to relitigate that conversation either. But he's trending in the right direction. That, I think, you had to see. Because you think about Ozzie and Olsen and Riley. These are integral hitters to the Braves' success. And I brought up Marcell Ozuna a little bit earlier, and he had the home run in the first inning on Sunday against Garrett Crochet, who absolutely carved up the Braves lineup. The Boston lefty was terrific. 7 innings, 12 strikeouts, just the 1 run allowed. And you look at Marcell Ozuna's numbers overall. He's hitting .284, got a .900 OPS, drawn a career-high number of walks. But would you believe that Marcell Ozuna, as of, 58 games into the season, and he's playing every day, except for the one series in Toronto, basically, he's got 25 RBI. So Marcell Ozuna is essentially on pace for about a 70, 75 RBI year, and he's batting 3rd, 4th, or 5th in the Braves lineup. And again, I kind of go back to that. The paces are not a perfect, encapsulation of everything, and they certainly don't necessarily forecast what could happen if a guy gets hot and has a huge month. But it is very strange to see Marcell Ozuna at this point, as good a hitter as he's been the last couple of years, and is still this year, with only 25 runs batted in. And it's because the bat has been taken out of his hands quite a bit. Some of it, I think, is opposing pitchers just pitching around him. Others of it is selectivity. And as I said a lot earlier in the show, you're not asking guys to, just expand your strike zone. I think that would drive people more nuts. And let me tell you, people have gone absolutely out of their minds some of these nights with the Braves' struggles and runners in scoring position. And look, I get it. It is not fun to watch. It's not fun to talk about. It's not fun to write about. And there's no question out there that can be asked of the players or the manager or the hitting coach or whoever that's going to be the magic elixir or the switch that's going to, I'm glad you asked. We are going to change this, this, and this. Thanks for asking. Now we know. And knowing is half the battle. If you get that reference, we can be friends. It's a tough, tough road for the Braves right now, though. There's just no two ways about that. The work is going to have to continue. The runners in scoring position is going to have to improve. But when I looked at the Marcell Ozuna RBI total, it was kind of alarming. Because you just think, surely Marcel's had a better year than that and more of an impact than that. But unfortunately, he hasn't been able to. And that is just symptomatic of everything that's not gone right in the Braves lineup. Now, Michael Harris II has not really been able to find a consistent run at the plate yet, and that's probably an understatement. But defensively, man, oh man, is this guy fun to watch. I mean, he makes a catch, it seems like a couple of times, 3 times a week, that you just look at and you think, this might be the best center fielder in baseball. And I know he's got competition. I said he should have won a Gold Glove. I've got somebody up in my mentions saying, here's 5 center fielders who are better. Okay, well, that's your opinion. And subjectively, we can argue about that. And if we want to get into the metrics, I'm sure there's a case to be made for all of them. But there's more than one good fielding center fielder in baseball, and Michael Harris II should have a seat at the table. There's your shocking revelation of the day. But in terms of offense, it's been a tough one for Michael Harris. He had hit safely in 9 out of 10 coming into Sunday, did wear the collar there, 0 for 4, and 3 punch-outs. But Garrett Crochet was going to be a tough ride. And I believe he got Aroldis Chapman in his other at-bats. So, good luck as a left-handed hitter trying to deal with that. But yeah, I think you got to see more offensively. And Harris has done this before. He's just been this slow starter. He's dealt with injuries the last couple of years. Thankfully, he hasn't had to deal with one of those yet, knock on wood, because, man, I'm tired of doing shows about the latest Brave to get hurt and how long they're going to be out. And it seems like it's happened too many times in the last 14 or so months. But when can he get it going? Because if they're going to do what I think they're going to do, which looks like try to take the pressure off him, put him down at the bottom of the lineup, and use him to kind of reignite things and have a productive hitter in front of Ronald Acuña Jr., and of the many ways that Ronald can have an impact is maybe giving pitchers a reason to throw more strikes to Michael Harris. He's going to have to improve some selection. I'll put it that way. Like some of the pitch selection, swing selection has been a big reason why Michael Harris has struggled this year. But having Ronald Acuña Jr. behind him is a lot different than having any of the other 7, 8, or 9 hitters that the Braves have run out there this year batting behind you. So you look at Sunday's loss, which was, again, 3-1 to the Boston Red Sox. Lost 2 out of 3 in that series. The Braves have lost 8 out of 11. They have tumbled from a place where they were, 24-23 to being now 27-31. So they've gotten over 500 and fallen right back down below it. And they're going to have to fight their way back up there again. But the 25th time in 58 games this year that the Braves have been held to 3 or fewer runs in a game. I mean, that is some offensive futility right there. So when I talk about a team that's basically middle of the pack at best, offensively speaking, in runs scored, middle of the pack as a home run hitting team for the most part, but has a top 10 pitching staff and was particularly good in May while the offense was particularly bad, and that's the only reason that you went 13-14 last month. When you lose 9 one-run games, I know why people want to pull their hair out. It's not a thing that I'm going to do because I don't have to anymore. But I understand the frustration that goes with watching this club on a nightly basis lose in that fashion. And I do think that even if you don't want to come out and talk about it and admit it and, belabor the point as a member of the team, it is not a great feeling to be this close night after night after night after night and not be able to come through with that big hit, that big inning, whatever the case is. And I think that's kind of part of the runners in scoring position struggles is guys pressing, guys trying to do too much. And I really do not know how you relieve that. Do you hire a team of sports psychologists? I don't know. Do you try to simplify things? Do you work a little bit less because maybe you've worked yourself too hard? I don't know. Maybe. Maybe not. Maybe you just keep working and things will work themselves out because it's baseball and it's weird like that. But either way, it is not a whole lot of fun. And the Braves, meanwhile, if you look at what's ahead, are going to have a schedule that may not be a whole lot of fun, especially if they're not able to do something about all these one-run games. The Braves have played more one-run games than any team in baseball this year, and they have a losing record in those one-run games. But what's ahead for Atlanta is a run against a bunch of playoff contenders for the most part here in June. You got the Arizona Diamondbacks coming in. I know they've been struggling as well, but, that's a team that's found itself able to put together a run and would like to do it again. Then you got the San Francisco Giants and the Milwaukee Brewers, who've been playing a pretty good brand of baseball for a while now. You got them after that. Then it's the Colorado Rockies, which if you're not keeping up with the standings, are now 9-50. The Rockies, they're on a pace to lose, I think it's 135 or 136 games, which would just obliterate the worst record in the history of baseball, which was set just last year by the White Sox. So, break out that really important trophy that no team wants to take home. But then you've got the New York Mets, the Miami Marlins, then a 4-game series with the New York Mets. So you see the Mets 7 times this month, and then you close it out with the Philadelphia Phillies again. So you're going to see some division rivals with some really, really important games, and you're going to have to face some other tough teams from other divisions. And yeah, you got the Rockies mixed in there. They're not very good. The Marlins, though, you're closer to the Marlins in the standings than you are to the New York Mets. So make of that what you will. The Braves cannot afford to take their foot off the gas in any series whatsoever. They got to win them all. That series against the Arizona Diamondbacks will start on Tuesday night, 7:15 for that one. 7:15 again on Wednesday, then a 12:15 business person special on Thursday before the Braves head across the country and will face the San Francisco Giants on Friday night at 10:15. That is what's ahead, a 3-game series against the Diamondbacks and 3 more against the Giants this week. That is what the Braves are looking at, and they're going to have to figure out how to win some games against some, at least, challenging competition in the case of Arizona. I know, again, they're going through it, but the Giants are no joke, and we have seen trips out west go wrong for the Atlanta Braves this year. A not-so-fun reminder. That is my time here on From the Diamond for this week. Again, you can find the show wherever you get your podcast. Just search for From the Diamond there. I want to thank my producer, Josh, for doing a great job, as always, and for Rich Waltz making some time for me this week. This has been From the Diamond on Sports Radio 92.9 The Game. I'm Grant McAuley. Until next week, so long, everyone.